Hey guys, tonight we step into the sunlit splendor of Greenwich Palace, where the scent of spiced wine and polished oak fills the air, and a young Henry VIII, vibrant and golden, commands a court pulsing with promise and peril. You stand in a dazzling hall, crimson tapestries woven with Tudor roses catching the light, as whispers of a cursed wound begin to shadow the king's boundless vigor. His laughter booms, but a noble in an indigo cloak hides a parchment. Could it hint at a doom to come? You'd last 5 minutes in this maze of silken secrets before tripping over a plot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Whisper in the comments where you're drifting off from and the hour on your clock. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift into tonight's shadowy tale together. You glide through Greenwich Palace in 1514, the air alive with the tang of mulled wine and the faint musk of leather from polished armor. The hall glows under bronze chandeliers, their candlelight dancing on crimson tapestries, each embroidered with golden Tudor roses that seem to pulse with Henry's youthful ambition. The king, a towering figure in a russet doublet, his auburn hair gleaming beneath a jeweled cap, strides among courtiers, his laughter echoing as he boasts of jousts and hunts. Yet you notice a faint limp, a shadow of pain in his step, as if a wound from a recent tennis match, perhaps on his thigh, hints at a curse to come. These nobles, you think with a chuckle, cheer their king but eye his favor like hawks. Imagine mistaking a bow for a scheme to steal his glory. The hall is a spectacle of Tudor excess, its oak floors gleaming, reflecting the teal and saffron cloaks of courtiers. A wicker table holds silver flagons, their Tudor rose etchings glinting, while a parchment with a crimson seal lies half-hidden, perhaps a physician's note or a noble's whispered plot. Henry, in his black velvet slipper, adopted after his foot swelled, sets a fashion, and you smile as a courtier fumbles to mimic it, nearly tripping over his own. A lute's melody weaves through the chatter, but a page stumbles, nearly dropping a bronze tray of spiced cakes, prompting a stifled laugh. Poor lad, juggling pastries and royal egos with equal clumsiness. The historical nugget here is a vibrant one. In 1514, Henry VIII, at 23, was a Renaissance prince, famed for his athleticism and charm, but a tennis injury in 1527 marked the first record of a sore leg, likely an ulcer on his thigh, treated by Thomas Vicary. This wound, healed with salves of ground pearls, hinted at the chronic affliction that would plague his later years. You can almost taste the wine's spice, can't you? Henry's early health, marred only by smallpox and malaria, contrasted with his sporting prowess. But this wound planted whispers of a curse that would shadow his reign, as courtiers began to watch their king's vigor with wary eyes. For an extra historical anecdote, consider this. Henry, fascinated by medicine, concocted his own gray plaster ointment, blending white lead and pearls to treat his courtiers' ailments. Imagine him, stirring potions like a scholar, while nobles whispered of his growing temper. You have to smile. These kings played physician as boldly as they ruled. Picture a courtier, slathered in Henry's salve, wincing as it stings under royal scrutiny. It's the kind of folly that makes you glad you're just a visitor, not dodging a king's homemade cures. Now, for a quirky elite oddity, Henry's court feasted on roasted peacocks, their feathers reattached for display, a lavish spectacle costing a fortune. Imagine the cooks, cursing as they pinned feathers for a king's whim. You grin at the thought. These royals spent more on show than sense. Picture a noble, preening like a peacock himself, only to spill wine on his cloak mid-toast. And speaking of excess, Henry's musicians played lutes till dawn. Imagine dozing off to a melody, only to be startled by a trumpet's blast. You chuckle again, picturing a courtier tripping over a lute case, muttering about royal revelry. You drift closer, your shadow blending with the chandelier's flicker. A parchment on the wicker table catches your eye, its crimson seal cracked, perhaps Vicary's report on Henry's wound or a noble's coded gossip. The scent of wax mingles with the wine's warmth, and you notice Henry's signet ring, its Tudor rose glinting, a symbol of his unyielding ambition. A courtier in a teal cloak whispers to another, their words sharp as a quill's scratch, and you wonder if they praise his health or plot for his favor. A servant fumbles with a candelabrum, nearly spilling wax, and you laugh softly. Poor soul, caught between candles and courtly schemes. The hall's warmth feels fragile, as if a curse's shadow already lingers. The scholarly riddle that lingers is a curious one. Was Henry's early wound a mere injury, or the first sign of a cursed affliction tied to his sporting zeal? Historians debate whether this thigh ulcer, possibly from an infected wound, foreshadowed the venous issues that later tormented him, or if it was a fleeting mark of his reckless youth. You feel the question's weight as you watch Henry stride, his limp barely hidden. If you were his physician, would you warn of future pain, or cheer his boundless vigor? As you glide through the hall, the lute's notes soften, blending with the rustle of silks and the clink of goblets. A tapestry's golden rose catches the light, and you smile at the thought of nobles weaving ambitions as grand as their feasts. Typical, isn't it? They'd rather plot than praise. Henry pauses by a window, the sunlight gilding his russet doublet, and you wonder if he senses the wound's faint echo. A noble adjusts his velvet cap, nearly dropping it, and you chuckle. Imagine scheming for a king when balance is the real battle. The air grows heavier, the wine scent fading into a colder draft, as if the palace senses a storm to come. You linger by the arched doors, the candles dimming, and the whispers of a cursed wound linger, a melody as haunting as the night itself. You wince as you stand in the frost-kissed tilt yard of Greenwich Palace in January 1536, where the air carries the sharp scent of crushed grass and polished steel, and the clash of lances echoes under a gray sky. Henry VIII, resplendent in a russet-armored suit, his golden crown glinting, charges on horseback, his laughter bold. Recall the vibrant king in the Tudor hall, his vigor shadowed by a wound? Now, his horse stumbles, and he crashes to the ground, the armored beast pinning his legs, a moment that sparks whispers of a curse's mark. Courtiers in indigo cloaks gasp, their murmurs blending with the wind's howl, and you sense a shadow settling over the king's reign. These nobles, you think with a wry smile, cheer their king but plot like the wind changes. Imagine mistaking a lance for a quill in their scheming hands. The tilt yard is a spectacle of Tudor might, its wooden stands draped with crimson banners, their golden Tudor roses fluttering, echoing the hall's tapestries from that sunlit court. A wicker barrier sags under the crowd's weight, while a bronze trumpet lies discarded, its notes silenced by the accident's chaos. Henry lies still, his face pale, as physicians in teal robes rush forward, their satchels spilling parchment notes, perhaps remedies or whispered fears of a cursed wound. A noble in a saffron cloak clutches a crimson-sealed letter, maybe a prayer for the king or a plot to sway his favor. A squire fumbles with a water jug, nearly splashing a physician, and you stifle a chuckle. Poor lad, dodging both mud and royal wrath. The historical nugget here is a pivotal one. In January 1536, Henry VIII, aged 44, suffered a catastrophic jousting accident at Greenwich, crushed under his armored horse, remaining unconscious for 2 hours. This injury, likely causing leg trauma or fractures, reopened old wounds and sparked chronic ulcers that plagued him henceforth. You can almost hear the crowd's stunned silence, can't you? The accident, coupled with and Bullen's miscarriage days later, marked a turning point, darkening Henry's mood and reign, as physicians struggled to manage his festering legs, their pain fueling whispers of a curse that echoed the tennis wound from years before. For an extra historical anecdote, consider this. Henry's physicians, led by Thomas Vicary, applied salves of ground pearls and white lead to his legs post-accident, a remedy he once crafted himself. Imagine the doctors, mixing potions under torchlight, while nobles whispered of his decline. You have to laugh. These royals turned medicine into a pageant. Picture a physician, spilling pearl dust on his cloak, cursing under Henry's impatient glare. It's the kind of drama that makes you glad you're just a visitor, not stirring a king's feudal cures. Now, for a quirky elite oddity, Henry's jousting armor was polished with gold leaf, a dazzling display that cost a fortune and dazzled the court. Imagine the armorers, cursing as they buffed gold under royal deadlines. You smile at the thought. These kings spent more on shine than safety. Picture a noble, mimicking Henry's armor, only to trip over his own spurs. And speaking of excess, The tilt-yard feasts featured swans roasted whole. Imagine a servant wrestling a swan's feathers, only to sneeze mid-plating. You chuckle again, picturing a courtier slipping on spilled wine, muttering about royal splendor. You drift closer, your shadow blending with the torchlight's flicker. A parchment lies near a wicker bench, its crimson seal broken, perhaps a physician's report or a noble's coded gossip about Henry's health. The scent of steel and frost mingles with the crowd's nervous sweat, and you notice Henry's signet ring, its Tudor rose glinting faintly, a callback to the hall's golden ambition. A courtier in an indigo cloak whispers to another, their words sharp as a lance's tip, and you wonder if they pray for his recovery or plot for a weakened king. A page adjusts a torch, nearly dropping it, and you laugh softly. Poor soul, caught between flames and fearful whispers. The tilt-yard's chill feels heavy, as if the curse's mark grows darker. The scholarly riddle that lingers is a haunting one. Did Henry's jousting fall unleash a cursed affliction, or was it merely the spark for his body's betrayal? Historians debate whether the accident caused a deep vein thrombosis, leading to chronic ulcers, or if earlier injuries set the stage for his leg's torment. Some see the curse as a myth born of pain. Others argue his reckless sports invited ruin. You feel the question's weight as you watch Henry stir, his face grimacing. If you were his confidant, would you urge rest or cheer his defiant charge? As you glide through the tilt-yard, the wind's howl softens, blending with the creak of armor and the murmur of prayers. A banner's golden rose sways faintly, echoing the Tudor hall's grandeur, and you smile at the thought of nobles weaving plots as bold as their cheers. Typical, isn't it? They'd rather scheme than shiver. Henry rises, supported by physicians, his russet armor dented, and you wonder if he senses the curse's grip. A noble fumbles with his cloak's clasp, nearly dropping it, and you chuckle. Imagine plotting a king's fall when you can't even fasten a cloak. The air grows colder, the steel scent fading into frost, as if the tilt-yard mourns its wounded king. You linger by a wooden stand, the torches dimming, and the whispers of a cursed mark linger, a melody as sharp and sorrowful as the winter night. You linger in the dimly lit Great Hall of Whitehall Palace in 1537, where the air hangs heavy with the scent of clove-spiced wine and the faint, acrid tang of festering wounds, masked by lavender sachets. Henry VIII, once the vibrant king of the Tudor hall, recall his golden vigor, sits enthroned in a russet doublet, his face shadowed by pain, his legs hidden beneath a velvet drape. The court buzzes with cautious revelry, but a fetid shadow clings to the king, his ulcers whispering of a curse born from that crushing tilt-yard fall. Courtiers in indigo cloaks murmur, their eyes darting to a wicker table where a crimson-sealed parchment lies, perhaps a physician's warning or a noble's plot. These nobles, you think with a wry smile, dance around their king's pain like moths to a flame. Imagine mistaking a bow for a scheme to flee his wrath. The hall is a tapestry of Tudor splendor, its crimson walls adorned with golden Tudor roses, their glow dimmed, echoing the tilt-yard's faded banners. Bronze candelabra cast flickering light on silver goblets, their surfaces etched with roses that recall the hall's earlier oaths. Henry shifts, wincing, as physicians in teal robes hover, their satchels spilling parchment remedies, salves of pearls, or whispered fears of a curse's grip. A noble in a saffron cloak conceals a letter, perhaps a prayer for the king's health or a bid for his favor. A lute's melody weaves through the tension, but a servant stumbles, nearly dropping a bronze tray of roasted swan, and you stifle a chuckle. Poor soul, dodging both feathers and the king's foul mood. The historical nugget here is a grim one. From 1536 to 1538, Henry VIII's leg ulcers, worsened by his jousting accident, became bilateral, seeping, and purulent, causing bouts of fever and pain that darkened his temper. His physicians, including Thomas Vicary, struggled to keep the wounds open to drain, using salves and painful treatments, while courtiers noted the king's growing cruelty, a shift from the bluff king Hal of old. You can almost smell the lavender's desperate mask, can't you? This period, marked by Anne Boleyn's execution and the loss of a potential heir, saw Henry's reign turn tyrannical, as the curse of his sore leg seemed to taint both body and crown. For an extra historical anecdote, consider this. Henry's court in 1537 hosted a feast to celebrate Edward's birth, with a fountain flowing with wine, a spectacle that drained the treasury while his ulcers festered. Imagine the servants, hauling barrels while nobles whispered of his health. You have to laugh. These royals turned pain into pageantry. Picture a courtier, splashing wine on his cloak, cursing under Henry's pained glare. It's the kind of excess that makes you glad you're just a visitor, not mopping up after a king's whims. Now, for a quirky elite oddity, Henry adorned his throne with velvet cushions embroidered with silver Tudor roses, a costly comfort to ease his aching legs. Imagine the embroiderers, pricking fingers to soothe a king's pain. You smile at the thought. These monarchs spent more on cushions than cures. Picture a noble, adjusting a cushion for Henry, only to drop it mid-bow. And speaking of folly, Henry's court jesters performed daring acrobatics to lift his spirits. Imagine one tumbling into a goblet tray. You chuckle again, picturing a courtier slipping on spilled wine, muttering about royal jests. You drift closer, your shadow blending with the candelabra's flicker. A parchment on the wicker table catches your eye, its crimson seal cracked, perhaps a physician's note on Henry's fever or a noble's coded gossip. The scent of clove fades into the wound's faint stench, and you notice Henry's signet ring, its Tudor rose dulled, a callback to the tilt-yard's dented armor. A courtier in a teal cloak whispers to another, their words sharp as a quill's scratch, and you wonder if they mourn his pain or plot for power. A page adjusts a candelabrum, nearly toppling it, and you laugh softly. Poor soul, caught between candles and a king's temper. The hall's warmth feels fragile, as if the curse's fetid shadow grows darker. The scholarly riddle that lingers is a troubling one. Did Henry's ulcers fuel his cruelty, or did his tyrannical reign invite a cursed affliction? Historians debate whether the chronic pain from his legs, possibly from venous issues post-accident, drove his rages, or if political pressures and personal losses shaped his wrath. Some see the curse as a myth born of suffering. Others argue his injuries unleashed a darker king. You feel the question's weight as you watch Henry grimace, his eyes fierce. If you were his counselor, would you urge restraint or fear his growing storm? As you glide through the hall, the lute's notes soften, blending with the rustle of silks and the clink of goblets. A tapestry's golden rose catches the light, echoing the tilt-yard's banners, and you smile at the thought of nobles weaving plots as intricate as their dances. Typical, isn't it? They'd rather scheme than soothe. Henry shifts, his russet doublet catching a moonbeam, and you wonder if he senses the curse's weight. A noble fumbles with his dagger's hilt, nearly dropping it, and you chuckle. Imagine plotting a king's favor when you can't hold a blade. The air grows heavier, the lavender scent fading into a cold draft, as if the palace mourns its ailing king. You linger by a velvet curtain, the hall's glow dimming, and the whispers of fetid shadows linger, a melody as sharp and sorrowful as the night itself. You watch from the opulent banquet hall of Hampton Court in 1542, where the air hums with the scent of roasted venison and mulled wine, barely masking a faint, sour whiff of decay that clings to Henry VIII. The king, once the golden youth of the Tudor hall, recall his vibrant oaths, sits heavily on a cushioned throne, his russet doublet straining, his swollen legs draped in velvet to hide festering ulcers. The court feigns merriment, but whispers of a curse, born from the tilt-yard's crushing fall and deepened in the fetid shadows, linger like smoke. Courtiers in indigo cloaks raise silver goblets, their smiles sharp, and you sense a throne buckling under royal agony. These nobles, you think with a wry chuckle, toast their king but dodge his temper. Imagine mistaking a cheer for a plea to escape his wrath. The hall gleams with Tudor excess, its crimson tapestries woven with golden Tudor roses, their luster faded, echoing the tilt-yard's tattered banners and Whitehall's dim glow. A wicker table groans under bronze platters of venison and sugared fruits, their rose etchings glinting faintly. Henry, his face flushed with pain, shifts uneasily, while physicians in teal robes linger, their parchment scrolls spilling from satchels, perhaps futile remedies or coded fears of a curse's grip. A noble in a saffron cloak hides a crimson-sealed letter, maybe a prayer for succession or a plot for favor. A lute's melody weaves through the chatter, but a servant stumbles, nearly spilling a bronze ewer of wine, and you stifle a laugh. Poor soul, juggling goblets and a king's foul mood. The historical nugget here is a heavy one. By 1541 to 1543, Henry VIII's leg ulcers, worsened by his jousting injuries, became a persistent torment, with infections and fevers confining him at times, while his obesity, nearing 28 stone, required a hoist to mount horses. His physicians, including Thomas Vicary, fought to drain the wounds, but their stench, noted 3 rooms away, shadowed his reign. You can almost taste the wine's bitter edge, can't you? This period, marked by Catherine Howard's execution and his marriage to Catherine Parr, saw Henry's temper flare, his pain fueling a tyranny that echoed the curse whispered since his early wound. For an extra historical anecdote, consider this. Henry's 1541 coastal tour to fortify harbors against invasion, despite his physicians' pleas to rest, saw him endure hours on horseback, his ulcers oozing beneath velvet wrappings. Imagine the grooms, sweating to hoist their king, while nobles whispered of his decline. You have to smile. These royals turned pain into parades. Picture a courtier, tripping over a stirrup, cursing under Henry's pained glare. It's the kind of spectacle that makes you glad you're just a visitor, not saddling a king's steed. Now, for a quirky elite oddity, Henry's banquets featured gilded pies filled with live birds, a costly surprise that delighted guests when cut open. Imagine the bakers, cursing as they stuffed sparrows into pastry. You grin at the thought. These monarchs spent more on whims than wisdom. Picture a noble, startled by a bird's flutter, spilling wine on his cloak. And speaking of excess, Henry's court kept a menagerie of exotic beasts. Imagine a servant chasing a loose monkey through the hall. You chuckle again, picturing a courtier dodging a monkey's leap, muttering about royal caprice. You drift closer, your shadow blending with the chandelier's flicker. A parchment lies on the wicker table, its crimson seal cracked, perhaps a physician's warning or a noble's gossip about Henry's health. The scent of venison fades into the wound's sour tang, and you notice Henry's signet ring, its Tudor rose dulled, a callback to the tilt-yard's dented armor and Whitehall's fetid air. A courtier in a teal cloak whispers to another, their words sharp as a quill's scratch, and you wonder if they toast his reign or plot for a new era. A page adjusts a candelabrum, nearly toppling it, and you laugh softly. Poor soul, caught between candles and a king's rages. The hall's warmth feels fleeting, as if the curse's weight presses heavier. The scholarly riddle that lingers is a poignant one. Did Henry's festering ulcers shape his tyranny, or did his relentless ambition fuel his body's ruin? Historians debate whether his pain, possibly from venous thrombosis or infection, drove his cruelty, or if his gluttony and defiance of rest worsened the curse's toll. Some see his suffering as karmic, others argue his choices invited agony. You feel the question's weight as you watch Henry grimace, his eyes fierce. If you were his confidant, would you urge restraint or fear his stormy wrath? As you glide through the hall, the lute's notes soften, blending with the rustle of silks and the clink of goblets. A tapestry's golden rose catches the light, echoing the tilt-yard's banners, and you smile at the thought of nobles weaving plots as lavish as their feasts. Typical, isn't it? They'd rather scheme than savor. Henry leans forward, his russet doublet catching a moonbeam, and you wonder if he senses the curse's tightening grip. A noble fumbles with his dagger's hilt, nearly dropping it, and you chuckle. Imagine plotting a king's favor when you can't hold a blade. The air grows colder, the wine scent fading into a stale draft, as if the palace mourns its burdened king. You linger by a velvet curtain, the hall's glow dimming, and the whispers of a festering agony linger. A melody as heavy and sorrowful as the night itself. You stand in a shadowed bedchamber of Westminster Palace in January 1547, where the air is thick with the scent of lavender and the sour sting of decay, barely masked by flickering beeswax candles. Henry VIII, once the golden king of the Tudor hall, recall his vibrant oaths, lies in a velvet-draped bed, his massive frame, swollen legs hidden beneath crimson covers, betraying a reign's end. The curse, whispered since the tilt-yard's fall, through fetid courts and burdened feasts, seems to linger in the room's heavy silence. Catherine Parr, in a russet gown, stands nearby, her quill poised over parchment, while nobles in indigo cloaks murmur prayers or plots. You sense a question: does the curse die with the king? These courtiers, you think with a wry smile, mourn with one eye on the throne. Imagine mistaking a prayer for a grab for power. The chamber is a somber echo of Tudor grandeur, its oak walls hung with faded crimson tapestries, their golden Tudor roses dim, recalling the tilt yard's banners and banquets glow. A wicker table holds a bronze censer, its smoke curling, while a crimson-sealed parchment lies folded, perhaps a physician's final note or a noble's coded succession plan. Henry's labored breaths rasp, his face pale, as physicians in teal robes hover, their satchels spilling remedies that failed to ease his ulcers' torment. A noble in a saffron cloak clutches a silver rosary, its beads glinting, perhaps a plea for Edward's reign or a whisper of betrayal. A servant fumbles with a candelabrum, nearly spilling wax, and you stifle a chuckle. Poor soul, dodging both flames and a king's fading wrath. The historical nugget here is a final one. In January 1547, Henry VIII, aged 56, died at Westminster, his leg ulcers and morbid obesity, 28 stone, compounded by fevers and infections that left him immobile, carried in a chair. His physicians, including Thomas Vicary, fought futilely to drain his wounds, their stench heralding his decline. You can almost hear the candle's faint hiss, can't you? His death, following years of pain and tyranny, marked the end of a reign shadowed by a curse that began with a tennis wound, deepened in the tilt yard, and festered through feasts, leaving England to ponder his legacy under young Edward VI. For an extra historical anecdote, consider this. Henry's final will, dictated in 1546, was sealed with a crimson stamp bearing his Tudor rose, a process so taxing that scribes worked by torchlight to finish it. Imagine the clerks, sweating over parchment while nobles whispered of succession. You have to laugh. These royals turned deathbeds into dramas. Picture a scribe, smudging ink under Henry's weakening gaze. It's the kind of chaos that makes you glad you're just a visitor, not scribing a king's last words. Now, for a quirky elite oddity, Henry's bedchamber was adorned with velvet hangings embroidered with silver stars, a costly attempt to cloak his pain in celestial splendor. Imagine the tailors, cursing as they stitched stars for a dying king. You smile at the thought. These monarchs spent more on decor than deliverance. Picture a noble, adjusting a hanging, only to tangle in its folds. And speaking of excess, Henry's physicians burned lavender candles to mask the stench. Imagine a servant sneezing mid-lighting, scattering wax. You chuckle again, picturing a courtier tripping over a chair, muttering about royal airs. You drift closer, your shadow blending with the candlelight's flicker. A parchment on the wicker table catches your eye, its crimson seal broken, perhaps Catherine's letter to Edward or a noble's final scheme. The scent of lavender fades into the wound's sour breath, and you notice Henry's signet ring, its Tudor rose dull, a callback to the tilt yard's dented armor and banquet's faded roses. A courtier in a teal cloak whispers to another, their words soft as a quill's scratch, and you wonder if they honor his legacy or plot for a new dawn. A page adjusts a censer, nearly toppling it, and you laugh softly. Poor soul, caught between smoke and a king's end. The chamber's silence feels heavy, as if the curse's shadow lingers. The scholarly riddle that lingers is a profound one. Did Henry's cursed legs, perhaps from venous thrombosis or infection, shape his tyrannical end, or did his relentless excess invite his ruin? Historians debate whether his pain drove his cruelty, or if his gluttony and defiance of rest fueled the curse's toll. Some see his death as its release. Others argue it haunted England's succession. You feel the question's weight as you watch Henry's breath slow, his eyes dim. If you were his confidant, would you whisper of peace or fear the curse's echo? As you glide through the chamber, the censer's smoke softens, blending with the creak of oak and the rustle of velvet. A tapestry's golden rose watches silently, echoing the banquet's faded splendor, and you chuckle at the thought of nobles weaving legacies as intricate as their prayers. Typical, isn't it? They'd rather plot than mourn. Catherine pauses, her russet gown catching the candlelight, and you wonder if she senses the curse's end. A noble fumbles with his rosary, nearly dropping it, and you smile. Imagine scheming for a throne when beads slip through fingers. The air grows colder, the lavender's scent dissolving into silence, as if the palace cradles a fading king. You drift from the bedchamber, the candlelight fading into a gentle, endless void, where the scent of lavender and decay melts into a winter's sigh. The golden Tudor roses, the rustle of velvet, the whispers of curses, all dissolve like frost on a quiet dawn. You're floating now, weightless, as England's stars blur into a soothing shimmer, their glow a whispered promise of rest. Henry's oaths, his tilt-yard fall, his festering pain, they slip into the night, leaving only the hum of a snowy silence. Share your thoughts below, and let the stillness carry you to slumber. Subscribe to Dark Lens Stories for more tales of noble shadows. Next, a Medici's poisoned chalice awaits. The frost's gentle touch softens, the chamber's shadows fade, and you're left with a quiet peace, as if the night itself sings a lullaby. Close your eyes, let the winter's embrace wrap around you, and drift into dreams where crowns rise and fall in silence. May your sleep be as gentle as a king's final breath.